They said Magnolia Ridge was the kind of town where nothing bad ever happened. A sleepy southern place where Sundays began with bells and ended with fried chicken on the porch, where prayers were louder than gossip and everybody knew who sat in what pew. But even in towns like this, sin has a way of slipping in quiet, through the cracks, through the silence, through the back doors of locked-up hearts. For 18-year-old Evelyn Harper, the church was both sanctuary and prison. She sang hymns with the voice of an angel, her long braids swaying under the hot ceiling fans of Mount Carmel Baptist Church. She wore the same white dress every Sunday, sat in the front row next to her mother and her stepfather, Pastor Elijah Brooks. To the town, they were the picture of grace, a family rooted in Scripture, a girl raised in faith. But nobody knew what happened when the Bible closed. Behind the stained glass and beneath the pious smiles, Evelyn was crumbling. She kept a diary under her mattress, not of prayers, but of questions. Questions about her body, about her feelings, about why she flinched when her stepfather's hand lingered too long on her shoulder, about why her mother, Deborah, never looked her in the eyes anymore. That diary had pages soaked in tears and the handwriting of a girl clawing at the walls of her own skin. She had been 13 when Elijah Brooks married her mother, 5 years ago. He was handsome and stern, a preacher with a commanding voice and silver-rimmed glasses that never left his face. The kind of man who quoted Scripture like poetry and touched his wife's back just a second too late when walking into a room. He called Evelyn his blessing, his second chance. But as the years passed, that blessing began to feel like a curse. At first, it was glances. Then it was gifts. A gold cross necklace on her 15th birthday. A new dress that was too tight in the chest. Then came the late-night talks, when her mother was at prayer group and he'd knock on her bedroom door, asking if she'd sinned. The way he'd sit too close. Ask her to kneel and pray. She would. And every time, she'd feel more shame than salvation. By the time Evelyn was 16, her soul was splitting in two. At school, she was quiet, polite, the girl who always said God bless and kept her head down. But online, in a secret Instagram account she created under a fake name, she was someone else. Someone who posed in makeup and lace. Someone who got messages from older men with usernames like Hot Daddy 69 and Southern Gent. Someone who could control who touched her for once. It was power, ugly power, dangerous power, but it was hers. She never meant to meet any of them, not until the night her stepfather slipped into her room after Bible study. He smelled like bourbon and said he was checking on her soul. When she resisted, he whispered that Eve had tempted Adam, that a man had needs, and that her silence was a godly obedience. The next morning, her diary was gone, and she never saw the gold cross necklace again. That was the morning Evelyn snapped. She didn't tell anyone. Who would believe the pastor's stepdaughter? Who would believe a teenage girl who took selfies in lingerie behind a fake username? So, instead, she found a number on one of those DM threads. A man named Clarence. He promised money, lots of it, and said he liked church girls. The irony made her sick, but she texted back anyway. 3 nights later, she snuck out of the house wearing the same white dress she sang in. She met Clarence in a cheap motel off Highway 92. He was older, polite, didn't ask for her real name, paid in cash. It was supposed to be one time, just enough to feel something other than disgust, just enough to punish herself for everything she couldn't say. But that one night became a habit, a secret she kept tucked in her Bible, between Psalms and Proverbs. The money she made, she hid in the lining of her church purse. Evelyn stopped praying. She stopped singing. Something inside her had rotted, and she could feel it leaking out every time she smiled in church. And then came the message that made her blood freeze. A new client. Same motel. Room 106. She walked in with her eyes low, the way she always did. But when she looked up, when the door clicked shut behind her, she saw him, Pastor Elijah Brooks, her stepfather, standing by the bed, shirt off, wallet in hand. Neither of them spoke. She dropped her purse. He took a step forward. She turned to run. But he grabbed her arm and whispered her name like it was a prayer. "Ava." She slapped him. Hard. He didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled. That was the last time Evelyn would ever step into Mount Carmel Baptist Church. 3 days later, the pastor reported her missing. What he didn't report was what he did next. The transition was never meant to be permanent. It started as rebellion, then morphed into survival, and somewhere in the middle, Evelyn Harper stopped recognizing the girl in the mirror. Gone was a timid teenager with tear-stained psalms folded in her pillowcase. In her place stood a young woman with red lipstick, fishnet stockings, and heels that clacked louder than any church bell in Magnolia Ridge. She wore a new name now, Lacey, a name that didn't carry shame, only power. And behind that name, she became whoever the men wanted her to be. But power, like sin, comes at cost. It had been 3 months since Evelyn first stepped foot into the Starlight Inn, a beige-walled graveyard of forgotten lives tucked behind the abandoned gas station on Highway 92. She knew the front desk clerk by name. She knew which vending machine still had cold cokes and which cameras didn't work. It had become a second home, if home meant pretending to be someone else just to breathe. By day, she still attended school, sitting quietly in the back row, hiding her tired eyes beneath heavy mascara. By night, she slipped into motel rooms, each one carrying the stench of old cigarettes and desperation. Some clients were kind, some were cruel, but none of them felt as dangerous as the silence inside her own house. That house with the white cross above the fireplace, and a man who whispered Bible verses with bourbon on his breath. She never took off the cross necklace he gave her, not because it meant something sacred, but because it reminded her of the lie he made her wear. Online, her inbox was full. Her photos, blurred just enough to be anonymous, had earned her a following of middle-aged men with hollow eyes and short fuses. They sent money. They sent fantasies. And sometimes they sent addresses. It was a Thursday evening when she received the message that would change everything. Room 106. Starlight Inn. $600 for the hour. No names. The price was too good to ignore. She texted back one word. Confirmed. That night, she stared at her reflection in the motel's cracked bathroom mirror longer than usual. Her curls were tied up high, her eyeliner dark and defiant. She wore a short red dress and the same black heels she once wore at prom, the one she never made it to because Pastor Elijah said the dress was too worldly. She was trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper, dread wrapped in curiosity. There was a wrongness in the air, thick and unmoving. At exactly 9 p.m., she heard the knock, a slow, deliberate knock. She opened the door, and the world stopped. Pastor Elijah Brooks stood in the doorway. No collar, no Bible, just slacks, a belt, and the face of a man who had already made peace with hell. He didn't look shocked. He looked pleased. Her knees buckled slightly, but she didn't let him see. She reached the doorknob to slam it shut, but his hand was already pushing through, firm and practiced. "Lacey?" he asked, like he didn't already know. Ava didn't answer. She stepped back instinctively, putting space between them, her heels clicking against the laminate floor. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. He smiled, gently closing the door behind him. "Neither should you." She stared at him. This wasn't some internet creep. This was a man who baptized babies on Sundays and laid hands on her mother's shoulders like God spoke through him. The same man who tucked her in at night and made her question her own mind for years. "You knew it was me," she said. "I've known for weeks." That stopped her. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "You've been watching me?" I recognize your eyes. Even under all this, he gestured at her dress, her lipstick, her skin. Sin doesn't change the soul, Ava, only hides it. She flinched at her real name on his lips. "I'm not Ava here. I'm not yours here." He took another step toward her. "You've always been mine." She wanted to scream. Instead, she backed into wall. "I'm not a child anymore." "No," he murmured. "You're a woman now. Beautiful. Tempting." It wasn't the first time she'd been called that, but hearing it from him, the man who claimed to speak for God, made her feel like the floor was sinking. "I should call the police." He laughed. A low, bitter laugh. And tell them what? That your stepfather paid to sleep with his own daughter? His voice was venom. Calm, dangerous. You'd go to jail, too. You're not some innocent little choir girl anymore. You're a prostitute now. The word hit like a slap. Tears sprang to her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. You ruined me, she whispered. I gave you purpose. You gave me trauma. He stepped closer again, reaching out to touch her face. She slapped his hand away so hard it left a red mark. Don't ever touch me again. That made him pause. His smile faded, replaced with something colder. You'll regret this. She was done trembling. No, she said. You will. He left after that, slamming the door behind him. Ava collapsed on the motel bed, the sobs ripping through her like thunder. Her hands shook as she grabbed her purse. Digging through it for the burner phone she kept hidden beneath the lining. She had saved screenshots, conversations, photos, everything she'd ever feared would one day be used against her. Now, she would use against him. This wasn't just about sin anymore. It was about survival. And Elijah Brooks had just made a mistake. He thought she was still a little girl in his church house. He didn't know Lacey was building a case and a plan, and she wasn't done yet. Ava Lynn Harper no longer wore the red dress, not because it embarrassed her, but because it was evidence. That night with Elijah Brooks had stained more than just fabric. It stained her silence, her sleep, her sense of self. And now, every breath she took felt like borrowed time. He hadn't touched her that night, but the way he looked at her, the way he smiled at her pain, was worse than any physical act, because it told her this wasn't over, that he wasn't done. And he wasn't. The very next Sunday, Elijah stood behind the pulpit in his gray suit and spotless white collar, like nothing had happened. He delivered a sermon titled The Dangers of Temptation. He preached about young women who lured godly men astray, about wolves in sheep's clothing, about Eve, and how she ruined paradise with a single bite. Every word was aimed at her, and everyone in the church nodded along and managed their agreement, while Ava sat 3 pews back, silent, still, her mother's hand on hers, squeezing tight like it meant something. He had turned her into the villain, and only the two of them knew it. For a while, they kept each other's secrets, a mutual destruction pact sealed in shame. Ava didn't tell anyone that the man behind the sermons was also the man in room 106. Elijah didn't tell the church that the pastor's daughter had become a call girl named Lacey. But the silence was never even, because only one of them held the pulpit. Only one of them controlled the narrative. Only one of them had power. The first time he blackmailed her, it came in the form of a text. You were underage when you started. All I'd have to do is make one call. She dropped her phone. Her fingers trembled. Her stomach turned. He could destroy her with the truth. Twist it. Weaponize it. Make her the villain publicly, just like he had privately. And her record wouldn't matter. The town wouldn't care. Who would believe a teenage escort over a man of God? He started making requests. Don't take clients on Sundays. Don't meet men from the county. Don't talk to Leonard Green. At first, she ignored them. Then she saw the photos. Screenshots from her burner phone. Images of her online profile. Even an audio clip of her laughing in one of the motel rooms. He had everything, and she had nothing. He never asked for sex. Not again. Not directly. But his presence began to fill every crack in her life. He showed up at her school under guise of mentorship, stood too close in the hallway, invited her to his study for counseling, and the looks. He always watched her, with those eyes that had once seemed holy. She started losing weight, stopped sleeping, even stopped taking clients, because she could barely look at herself anymore. Every dollar she made felt like proof of her guilt. Every motel key in her drawer felt like a tombstone. One night, after another threatening message from Elijah, this time warning her to stay away from a reporter who had asked about the church's finances, she packed a bag and tried to leave town. But as she waited for the Greyhound bus in the rain, she saw him, standing across the street, holding a black umbrella, smiling. She didn't get on the bus. She knew then Elijah Brooks would rather bury her than let her go. Ava stopped going to church, stopped praying, even stopped saying her own name. Lacey became her default mask, and behind that mask, she started doing something new. She began collecting secrets. She hacked into her old email account, dug up chat logs, found old photos from clients who thought anonymity made them invincible. She cataloged them, saved them to a hidden USB drive. Names, dates, hotel rooms, payments. And Elijah, she started following him, watched which houses he visited, which bank account he transferred money into, how many envelopes he slid beneath the deacon's door after dark. The walls weren't just closing in on her anymore. One night, she left an envelope in his mailbox. No return address. Just a single photo. Him standing outside room 106. The caption? Keep pushing me. I'll push back. The next morning, she found a dead bird nailed to her locker. Ava flinched when she saw it, but didn't cry. Fear had given way to fury now. She no longer cared about survival. She wanted justice. Or revenge. Or both. Because if she was going to burn, he was going with her. She bought a second burner phone. One for leverage. One for war. She recorded conversations. Printed bank statements. Even confronted an old client. A married deacon who had once paid for a night at the Starlight Inn and got him to admit it on tape. She was no longer a puppet in her own skin. She was pulling the strings. And yet, each night, she still cried herself to sleep. Because no matter how much evidence she gathered, no matter how many threats she sent back, she was still that girl beneath the hymn books. The one who believed love meant obedience. That family meant silence. That church meant safety. She had no allies, no savior, no way out, until one morning, the police came to her school, not to arrest her, but to ask questions. Elijah Brooks had been found unconscious in the parking lot behind the church, his car door wide open, his wallet missing, and in his shirt pocket, a photo of Ava in her choir robe, written on the back, "Confess or next time I won't miss." Ava was called into questioning. She kept her answers short, calm, careful, because whoever sent that message, it wasn't her. But whoever it was, they were telling her something. She wasn't the only one watching now. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. Room 106 at the Starlight Motel hadn't changed. The sheets were still cheap, the air still stale. The chipped mirror still reflected nothing but damage. Ava Lynn Harper sat on the edge of the bed, her legs crossed, her purse beside her like a landmine. It was 9:14 p.m. The room had been booked under a fake name, Lacey Thorne, the alias she'd buried months ago. But tonight, she needed it again, not a hide, but to bait a ghost out of the dark. The knock came at 9:17. She didn't answer right away, just stared at the door. 1 second, 2, then, knock, knock. Lacey, the voice behind the door. Familiar, calm, coated in holy venom. She opened it slowly. Elijah Brooks stepped inside without waiting for permission. His Bible was under his arm. His collar was perfectly stiff, but his eyes were frantic. "This ends tonight," he said, closing the door behind him. Ava said nothing. She walked past him, sat back down on the bed, and picked up the Bible he'd left her the first time they met in this room. The same one that once made her feel safe. Now, it was just another prop in a play neither of them controlled anymore. "I warned you not to push me," he said, pacing. "All this, the letters, the threats. I've tried to protect you." "Protect me?" Her voice cracked, then hardened. "You protected yourself. You used me. You came to me," he snapped. "You wanted attention. Ava, you wanted to feel powerful. You." "I was 17, she cut in, rising from the bed. 17. And you were screwing my mother, running a church, and paying me for silence." He grabbed her wrist tight. She didn't flinch. "I made mistakes," he hissed. "But you think this town would believe you over me? I've buried men with cleaner records than yours." Ava didn't pull away. Instead, she pulled something from her purse. A small voice recorder. She clicked it on. "Say that again," she whispered. "Tell me how you buried people." Elijah went still. "You've been recording me?" His voice dropped, trembling with rage. "For weeks," she said. "Every sermon, every threat, every lie, including the one about your charity fund, the one that doesn't exist but somehow pays for that Lexus you parked behind the church." His hand rose before she could react. A sharp slap cracked across her cheek. She fell backward, hit the bed frame, and scrambled up, blood in her mouth. He came at her again, but she reached the drawer beside the bed, the one she'd used 1,000 times before to hide tip money, condoms, broken dreams. This time it held a knife. Ava didn't stab him. She just held it, between them, between their shame. "Elijah," she whispered, "you need to leave." But he didn't. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a pistol, a small black handgun, cold and unregistered. He raised it, hand shaking. "I'm not going to prison," he said. "Not for you. Not for anyone." Ava's body froze, but her mind screamed, "This is it. This is how it ends." But then, bang. The sound wasn't from his gun. It was from the door. Someone kicked it open. Hard. The lock shattered. The frame cracked. And standing in the doorway was her mother, Darla Brooks, still in her waitress uniform, still smelling like cigarettes and regret. But her eyes, they weren't confused. They were clear, focused, and burning. "Elijah," she said, voice low, trembling with fury. "Put the damn gun down." He turned, startled. "Darla, baby, it's not what it looks like." Another sound, this one quieter. Flesh meeting flesh. The blade. Ava had swung. She didn't remember doing it, didn't feel it, didn't even realize until blood sprayed onto the white motel curtains. Elijah screamed. The knife was in his side. Deep, he felt his knees, the gun clattering away, gasping, hands pressed to his ribs, blood seeping through his holy collar. Darla rushed forward, pulled her daughter back, screamed at someone to call 911, but Ava didn't hear anything. All she saw was the Bible on the bed, soaked in blood. Leviticus 18, verse 8. The page Elijah had bookmarked that night. "Do not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is your father's nakedness." It dripped red now. The police arrived at 9:32 p.m. For officers, one EMT, a detective named Fallon. The next 14 minutes were a blur of sirens, shouting, and a single horrifying truth unraveling across the cheap motel carpet. Elijah was alive. Barely. But what he said in the ambulance shocked them all. "She's not a victim," he whispered. "She seduced me. She recorded everything." But Ava had the recorder, and it didn't lie. By 10:11 p.m., Detective Fallon had heard enough. 2 hours later, Elijah Brooks was under arrest, charged with statutory rape, solicitation of a minor, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The church was sealed off, the charity fund frozen, and room 106, it was declared a crime scene. The motel manager gave the police security footage, one that showed Elijah entering the room, with the Bible, with the gun, alone, no seduction, no doubt, only a predator exposed. The courtroom smelled like old wood and sweat. 100 years of southern heat soaked into every pew, and not even the air conditioning could chase out the tension. Evelyn Harper sat at the witness stand, back straight, hands folded. Her hair was pulled back into a simple braid. No makeup, no jewelry, just a cross around her neck, a symbol that once meant salvation, now tarnished by everything it failed to protect her from. To one side sat Elijah Brooks, his wrists shackled, suit ironed too stiffly for a man who once preached grace. The preacher turned predator. His eyes didn't meet hers. To the other side sat Ava's mother, Darla, trembling as the prosecutor held up a small black leather-bound book. The Diary of Evelyn Harper. The prosecutor said, turning to the jury, a 15-year-old girl, full of questions, confusion, and eventually evidence. The defense objected. Overruled. Page after page was read aloud. Quietly, painfully. "I know what he's doing is wrong." Ava had written in one entry, but he says God forgives even the darkest sins. He says if I tell anyone, the church will fall and Mama will leave me too. Gasps broke through the courtroom. Another page. He told me tonight I make him feel closer to the Lord, that the flesh is weak, but love is strong. I want to believe him, but it hurts. It always hurts. And then the last entry, 2 days before her arrest. He gave me the money again, told me to buy something pretty, told me he loved me. But tonight, I saw him hold Mama's hand, and I realized I'm not the only lie in his life. I'm just the only one with a price tag. Elijah shifted in his seat. The jury stared, stone-faced, but outside the courtroom, it was chaos. Protesters lined the courthouse steps, some with signs saying justice for Ava, others with Bibles lifted high, shouting, no girl that age could be innocent. Church members, neighbors, even family friends turned on each other. Some blamed Elijah, others blamed Ava, and still others blamed Darla for seeing too little, too late. Inside, the trial continued. Digital forensics proved the voice recordings were authentic. Hundreds of messages, dozens of calls, transactions from Elijah's personal accounts to Ava's Cash App under the name Lacey Thorne, hotel check-ins, surveillance footage. The truth wasn't just spoken. It was recorded, downloaded, time-stamped. Still, the defense painted Ava as manipulative, a rebellious girl from a broken home. She sought him out. They argued. She knew what she was doing. She was 17 when it started, a month shy of 18. In this state, that's legal. But legality is a morality. And what began before 18, what bled into violence, what ended with a Bible soaked in blood, none of it was normal, none of it was righteous. On the 7th day of testimony, Ava stood one last time. The prosecutor asked if she had anything else to say. She didn't look at the jury. She didn't look at Elijah. She looked at her mother. I wanted you to know, Ava said, her voice shaking, that I tried to tell you, twice, but you were so happy, finally happy. I didn't want to break you. Tears rolled down Darla's face. I was wrong, Ava continued, to stay silent, to keep the secrets. But I was just a kid. He was the one who knew better. He should have known better. That night, the town held its breath. The verdict came the next morning. Guilty, on all counts. Sexual exploitation of a minor, rape, fraud, witness intimidation, attempted murder. Elijah Brooks collapsed into his lawyer's arms, face pale, hand shaking. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. But the gavel didn't bring peace. Outside, the crowd erupted. Cheers, shouts, scorn. Ava's no angel, someone yelled. She destroyed a church. No, he destroyed it, another cried. The town was split in two, and in the middle, Ava stood quietly, holding her mother's hand. The local paper ran a headline the next day, Devil in the Pulpit or Temptress in the Pew. The reporter had written both sides, but the subtext bled blame. Ava never spoke to the media. She didn't write a book. She didn't do interviews. She packed her things and left Pine Hollow within a week of the sentencing. A scholarship came through from a women's trauma center. She moved north, changed her number, got a job at a diner, started community college. But every time she heard a bell over a door, every time a man smiled too long, every time someone said the word preacher, she felt her ribs tighten. She started therapy, wrote new diary entries, not to remember, but to reclaim. As for Darla, she sold a house, stopped going to church, and joined a support group for mothers who miss the signs. They always think it can't happen in their home, she told them, until it does. And by then, the walls are full of ghosts. Elijah's old church was turned into a rehab center. His face was erased from every framed photo, but his shadow lingered, because some people still whispered she wanted it. Some people still called her a liar, a Jezebel, a prodigal girl who wandered too far. But Ava knew the truth, and that was enough. The truth was buried under faith, family, and fear, until she bled it onto Bible pages. If the story gripped you, if it made you angry, made you feel something, don't let it fade in silence. Backhand Index Pointing Right subscribe to the Family Crime Exposed for more haunting, real-life stories they tried to bury. Bell turn on notifications, so you never miss the next secret pulled from the shadows. Speaking Head, drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Ava victim or something else? Would justice have been served without her diary? Let's talk about the truth they never wanted told.